This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
Good afternoon, everyone. As agreed at the Assembly's annual meeting on the 10th of May 2024, the Confirmation Hearings Committee is allowed to appoint a chair on a meeting-by-meeting basis for the 2024-25 Assembly year. Therefore, for the first item of business, I will conduct an election for the chair for this meeting in accordance with the GLA's standing orders. Can I ask, are there any nominations?
I'd like to nominate Assemblymember Baker.
Thank you. Do I have someone to second that nomination?
I second Assemblymember Baker.
Thank you very much. Therefore, I can declare that Assemblymember Baker is elected chair of the Confirmation Hearings Committee for today's meeting.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon, and I'll welcome everyone to this meeting of the Confirmation Hearings Committee. Please make sure your electronic devices are switched to silent mode to avoid any interruptions. And the Chair of the Assembly has agreed that this meeting be called as a matter of urgency in order to hold a confirmation hearing for the Mayor's proposed appointees to the role of co-chairs of the Mayor's Cultural Leadership Board within 3 weeks of the date of receipt of the notification from the Mayor in accordance with Section 100B 4B of the Local Government Act 1972. We have a few short items of business before we begin the hearing. Can I now ask our clerk, Diane Richards, if any apologies have been received for today's meeting?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for absence have been received from Assemblymember Desai, and in accordance with Standing Order 2.4, with the permission of the Chair, Assemblymember Wilson is attending the meeting remotely as a non-voting participant today.
Thank you. Can I ask the committee to note its membership as agreed at the London Assembly plenary meeting on the 23rd of January 2025? Noted. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendations set out at item 5 and ask Assembly members if they have any other disclosable pecuniary interest to declare?
Nope. Noted.
And can I also invite Amanda Parker and Tom Slay, welcome, to declare any interests relevant to the business of this meeting or in relation to your proposed appointments? Thank you. Can I ask the committee to confirm the minutes of the meetings held on the 2nd of December and the 9th of December 2024?
Agreed. Agreed, yeah.
Can I ask the committee to note the response from Mette Coburn MBE to commitments made at the Confirmation Hearings Committee meeting on the 9th of December 2024?
Noted.
And those are all our bits of business. Thank you. And now we get down to it. Welcome again to Amanda Parker and Tom Slay. So the committee will be putting questions to you in relation to your proposed appointments to the co-chairs of the Mayor's Cultural Leadership Board. However, can I ask members to note the background information circulated within the agenda for the meeting, the information received from the Mayor and the information received from the candidates. Thank you. We will now move on to the question and answer session. So I'll be asking the first question and then we'll move on to other members of the committee. And as you know, we've got a member online as well. We'll be putting questions to both of you. So I think members will be sort of asking you in turn to answer, but please do feel free to make sure that you've got your part of that question, your answer to the question out, and please do speak up if there's anything else you need to say, because obviously it's a slightly unusual situation having a meeting with co-chairs. Okay. So first question is, can you outline how you feel your previous experiences will help you as co-chairs of the Mayor's Cultural Leadership Board? Amanda, can we start with you?
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity for us to be here talking to you about this. We are very excited about this role. I'm saying we. I have a 25-year plus track record working in the creative and cultural industries, including as Chief Executive of IncArts UK, which was the UK's leading authority on inclusion and diversity in the cultural sector workforce. In my professional career, I've led creative and cultural industries teams across broadcast, screen, live events, orchestral music, theatre, dance, craft and museums, heritage and archives, as well as in local authorities and in communication roles. And I've also served as Vice Chair on the previous Cultural Leadership Board. So I'd be honoured to follow Moira's footsteps in that respect, but I feel like the total of my professional life has also informed my ability and fitness to lead in this role, should I be appointed. I've experienced chairing boards of multiple stakeholders, including local authorities. I will reference Sure Start, Homerton and Hackney Wick, which at the time was the third most deprived area in London, which brought together under a £3 million budget the remit of addressing disparities in under fives life experiences. So chairing that board was a cross-sector board of health, education, social care and cultural activities all under the one. So I feel like that experience of chair leadership is very important. I could go on, but I feel that I should stop and say I think it's the combination of my own experience as a leader, my experience on the board as the vice chair, and having chaired cross-sector local authority-involved boards as well brings me to this today.
Thank you. Tom?
Thank you. Thanks, Amanda. And thank you, everybody, for making time to be here today for the hearing for us. So I moved to London from the East Midlands 25 years ago. It was for economic reasons, like so many others, but it was mainly the cultural offer and the incredible breadth of things you can enjoy in the cultural and creative space here that have kept me here, despite occasionally opportunities to move away. And it's that love of the London cultural scene which I think has led me to be extremely excited and interested in this role. I got a lucky break 10 years ago when I got onto the board of the Barbican Arts Centre. That's one of Europe's largest performing arts centres. About 1 million people a year go through its doors. I became chair of that centre for 4 years. We had good times, we had bad times, particularly the pandemic, but it was a hugely informative and instructive time for me as a chair. Subsequently, I've had other opportunities. I now am chair of council at Goldsmiths College, which is part of the University of London, down in New Cross. You're probably familiar with it. If not, it's probably considered one of the country's preeminent arts and humanities universities, particularly strong in fine art. We have other performing art degrees at undergraduate and postgraduate level, and it works very much in and with its community in New Cross in South East London, which I think is incredibly important in terms of its mission. Further afield, I'm chair of Norwich Theatre. It's a theatre that is not in receipt of public funds, so it's essentially commercial. Again, it does a lot of public community work. But the connection with London is that it, of course, like so many regional theatres and regional production houses, brings activities, brings performances here to the capital, because, of course, London provides a stage to a global audience for some of the best art and content from around the nation. I'm also chair of something called the South Bank Employer Group, which is essentially a membership body for businesses, for educational establishments, for a hospital, and the cultural bodies on the south bank of the river, which includes the esteemed South Bank Centre, the two Vic Theatres, the British Film Institute. And there we have a mission to try and promote that part of London as a kind of tourist destination, and to try and make it the best place to come and work, to live, to visit, and to study. So I think those experiences and that kind of shared passion that we have for the creative industries in the country, but also here in the city, kind of give me a useful blend of experiences that I'll bring to bear should we be appointed as co-chairs of the Leadership Board.
Thank you. Thank you both. Is there anything else on that people want to pick up on? No, that's fine. I'll hand over to Assemblymember Russell for a second.
Thank you. And thank you for that kind of potted background, because that's really, really helpful setting the scene. I'm interested to find out how you plan to work together as co-chairs of the Mayor's Cultural Leadership Board, and any particular challenges you see in having co-chairs rather than a single chair. And coming from a political party with co-leaders, I'm used to the concept of two people providing that kind of leadership in a role. But I just wondered if you could say sort of, what you think about that co-chair role and any of the challenges. So Amanda, do you want to start us off?
So having worked in senior leadership roles as part of a job share at Directors UK, leading its public affairs and communications team in championing the rights of the UK's 8,000 plus film and TV directors, I've got a good understanding and practice in the practical applications and challenges and arrangements you need to make for joint leadership roles, which I'd bring to bear if we are successful in this application. And from my experience as a consultant in the creative industries, I understand the challenges of solo leadership, and I know how valuable leaders find it to have peers to share ideas and strategy and concerns with, and joint leadership provides that. In fact, as part of my consultancy, I spend a lot of time exploring with senior leaders the possibilities for joint leadership, and it's an idea certainly in the sector that has a lot of both traction and has appeal for senior leaders. The synergy of having joint leadership can be seen in the leadership of Claire Walker and Hannah Essex, who are joint CEOs of UK Theatre and Society of London Theatre, and who came from the Institute for Business, I believe. CBI, I think they came from. Daniel Evans and Tamara Harvey are joint leaders at the Royal Shakespeare Company, of which I'm a trustee, and Indy Rubisingham and Kate Vara are joint leaders at the National Theatre. So there are lots of models in the cultural sector that we can speak to, but not just the cultural sector. Dominic Zalman and Professor Parveen Yaqub have just stood down as joint chancellors at Reading University. So the benefits of joint leadership are well documented in research, and we bring complementary skills. So in terms of managing the process, if that's what your question is about, we believe that two heads are better than one. We know that peer support at senior level is highly valued. We know that we have each other to pick up should one or other be busy. In terms of the practical management, for me, I'm a former director of communication, so I'm very experienced in thinking about not just how you communicate, when you communicate, who to and in what format. And I think to do this well, we need to not have the one view, but to establish a space where informed dissent is welcome. And this is an advisory board. The idea is to generate and elicit and solicit insights and ideas. So there isn't a precondition for us to be on the same page in every view, in every situation. The important thing is for us to be leading with transparency of process and clarity, and making sure we move all of the members of the board to the same goals and align joint and common purpose there. So practice, for me, is about clear and practical processes of communication, being very flexible and adaptable with our times, we are able to look at each other and one pick up on the other when one is busy, when one is focusing on here, the other is looking out. I think there are benefits. It's two heads are better than one. So if we're appointed, our brief is to keep the board's dialogues attuned to those priorities in the context of the many and competing demands, but also to activate collaboration and consensus and model and evidence that in the way we work. We've already started to give time to establish a way of working together, to understand how each other have different needs, different ways of expression, where our flow is on that, and we'll continue to do that, I think, irrespective of the appointment. I think we're going to continue to do that. I've just put you in it there. We're going to continue that. And as a former vice chair of the board, I have an understanding of how the unit works, which is important to helping draw out the most useful input from the board, which also supports how we communicate together. In terms of the process of managing that, I think it's important that we have moments where we come together and work out what our joint position is and the flow of the meetings and how we'll practically manage it. I think it's important to have some overlap and some distance. I think two heads are better than one because there are two, not because we're trying to be the one person. You get more than the half from each of us. I hope that helps answer some of the...
Certainly does. Is there anything that you think would be a particular challenge?
Do you want to pick up on that one, or should I? No. I think the challenge is the challenge of managing a board in particular. What we need to do is to make sure that people understand that our decisions and our steer and chairing is joint, and to mitigate for any preference to speak to the one or the other. And that's about our good communication. So if people have a preference or a preferment of talking to one person or the other, that's absolutely fine. We're not trying to be in everybody's pockets all the time. This is an advisory board. But what's important is that we share the intelligence and the knowledge and understanding between us and demonstrate effective and joint knowledge and leadership in that respect. So I think that's a challenge, managing conversations that are atomised, not in the room. I think what's also a challenge, potentially, is the one that's common and true to most board management, which is keeping people on track and on target on the things that are in front of us, so that we don't get sidetracked by hang about whose turn is it and process. But I think, we're grown-ups and we know how to do that. And as I said, we are already establishing the dialogue that we'd like to evidence in the space.
Great. Thank you very much. Tom?
Thank you. I think Amanda has answered the question far better than I probably would have been able to do, but let me have a crack at some additional thoughts. And the first is, of course, this is not a scrutiny committee. It's not a committee that would be allocating budgets. It's a committee of 20 people, which is pretty big, to be honest. And as a result of that, I think one of the most important characteristics of the committee will have to be collaboration. And I think that this type of committee, which is fairly unique actually in terms of its composition, lends itself to different models of leadership. And therefore I think the collaborative leadership of co-chairs is actually the right one for this incarnation of the Mayor's Cultural Leadership Board, which of course has existed in one format or another since the first Mayor of London many years ago. The fact that it is so large, I think, also means that two chairs, as you said, Amanda, two heads are better than one. Two pairs of eyes looking out for people in the room are better than one. It's my experience that quite often some of the most useful insights in a board meeting come from the people who are often the quietest, and having two of us looking out for and trying to draw out some of those insights, I think, is a powerful tool that we'll have at our disposal as co-chairs. We get on, we like each other, that's a good start. We've also spent quite a lot of time together already getting to know each other. We will be spending more time in the coming weeks. And of course, we haven't been appointed. Should we be appointed, the first meeting won't be for some time. That gives us more time to work through the more practical, kind of in the moment realities of how we'll be managing the boards as well. And the other point I think is worth making is we will have fantastic secretarial support from the team here at the GLA. We've already had that support from them as part of this process, and I know that we'll be in really good, safe hands should we be appointed.
Thank you. Any other challenge? Yes.
I think the challenge will be behavioural, which is people may not be used to being part of a board that has co-chairs. And so, as with all boards, it's going to be really important that we don't just spend those 4 or 6 meetings a year together in a room. We spend some time on the kind of pastoral side of things, getting to know each other. Any board benefits from that, in my experience. In fact, in a couple of days' time, we've got the Goldsmiths Away Day of our board. But also just making sure that everyone is familiar with and comfortable with a slightly different way of working. But I don't see that as an insurmountable obstacle.
Thank you. Thank you very much, both of you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Assembly Member Garrett.
Afternoon. Perhaps I'll start with you, Tom. I'll alternate back and forth. So I'm thinking about outcomes, really. What would you hope to achieve in this role or co-role? And what does success look like? As you must have that thought, don't you, when you're stepping up to some exciting new role? What do you think you could change? What do you think you could do better? And what ultimately, when some new person is taking over, what would you like to be different and better that you're handing over?
Well, thank you for the question. The first thing I think to say is, should we be appointed, we would then sit down together and with the team, and then at the first meeting to think through and agree the work plan, certainly for the year ahead, if not further range than that. So we can't say for sure what specifically we will be working on. What we do know is that the 2018 cultural strategy, which was agreed and written up and advised on by our predecessors, will be something that we will be part of the delivery of. We won't be delivering it in an executive sense or on the ground sense, but we will be there both as a sounding board for new ideas that might form part of that overarching strategy, or indeed for just as a kind of a check mechanism should the deputy mayor or the mayor or any of the team in the cultural and creative industries unit want to talk to us about that. So it's hard to kind of say specifically, here's a certain action that we'd like to kind of have our names on at the end of our time. But I would imagine that there could be some quite interesting signature ideas. We know, for example, that the creative enterprise zones, which have now been up and running for some time, have worked really well, and they've been worked really well in collaboration with local authorities across the capital, and we know that there is a willingness and an interest here at the Assembly and the GLA to expand them across other parts of the city. So it would perhaps be nice, as an example, to see that expanded and rolled out, and to get the input from the 18 other people who will be in the room on how that could be done most effectively. So maybe it's about sharpening and refining some of the delivery mechanisms that are already there, or maybe it's helping come up with ideas for new delivery mechanisms, all under the canopy of the current strategy.
Okay. That's, if you'll forgive me, that is a sort of process answer. I suppose my question was an outcome answer. When you hand on the baton, inevitably, I don't assume if you're appointed, you'll be there, till kingdom come. Eventually, you'll move on. Is there not something when you were approached about this role, do you not think, I'd really like to get something like this done?
Can I respond
Certainly,
to that?
yeah.
So I think Tom, I want to echo what Tom said in terms of we don't want to prejudge or assume anything about the direction of travel for the board, because I feel that is for the board to come together and kind of go, okay, what's our agenda in terms of the practice? But certainly, if I think about what the board is for, the scrutiny and advising, the insights given, the intelligence gathering, and making sure all of the stuff that we do, which is connect with the cultural and creative and cultural industries as widely as possible, comes back to the mayor and his team in a timely way that's useful to them. So again, going back to your question about the challenge, one of the challenges is always timing. Can we convene usefully in a really helpful way and feed back our insights in a way that's timely and useful to strategy and implementation? So in terms of what I'd like to see improve and what I'd like to hand on. I'm really pleased that when I started on the board, we had very clear processes which were, I suppose, more familiar and traditional in the way the board worked in terms of minutes, agendas, and a presentation, a broadcast, if you like, to, and reflections back. And what we've done in the last iteration, I think in the last half of my time previously on the board, was to workshop ideas. You know, it's a much more dynamic way of drawing insights when we come together and convene individuals that the team may not have sight of, bring those people into the space, but actually go together in hubs and talk through issues and really dynamically feed back those insights. It felt a much fresher and more rich environment. So I'd like to personally see that model explored more, because I think we can continue to build on that to really get those insights to the team in a way that's effective and useful for them. Okay. I think that's true. I'm really conscious that since the last iteration of the board, some issues that are very common to the economy, and the Mayor's priorities, have become more pressing for the cultural and creative industries. And I'm not going to, I mean, there will be scope and time. I'm sure we won't avoid talking about funding in this conversation, but I don't mean the funding crisis. I do mean the growth and proliferation of AI and AI use. Now, there are lots of initiatives around the creative and cultural sector and ideas being explored about how and what we do around AI, but certainly we had a fantastic session that informed the Mayor's team's process around thinking about what that means for culture. I'd like the board to be diving even more deeply on that, because that feels like a pressing concern, which at the beginning of my term as a board member, it wasn't as pressing. AI wasn't as uppermost in the mix of challenges to the sector. So that's one thing. I'd like us to have a dialogue that's useful and informs the Mayor's policy on AI. I'd like the process to be more dynamic and flowing. We've started that. I think we can build on that. And the last thing I would say that I'd be really interested to see is young people's voices represented in the space. We have, and we know and understand and align with the Mayor's priorities for young people in the capital. And I am really excited about ways that we can also evidence that in the work of the board itself.
Okay, and just thinking, so I was going to ask what you've been on the board previously, or experienced the board. I was going to ask you what are the things that you might seek to change. You've given us an example of one. I don't know if either you or Tom have an example of something where you think, here's something I'd like to change up or explore differently about the way that we work.
I feel like only I can answer that question, because I would say we have a fantastic engagement with the team. They are very frequently in the room. There's always presence in the room with the team, but we also have visitors from the wider teams, the regeneration teams, etc., specifically to the topic that we're discussing at hand. I don't feel like that's a change that needs to be had. I'd say that's a yes, please, more of the same. I think similarly, as I've spoken to the format of the meetings and the way we have them changing is also, it's in train, and I'd like more of that. I think the support from the team is fantastic. They're very clear. They give us updates. There is a real two-way flow. And I wouldn't change anything of that. So I'm just kind of going through to go, I think that the change piece is really part of the board's duty and what we're here for, which is to gather insights, convene, advise and steer in a way that's timely. And I think my focus would be on making sure we do that in a way that's timely. Okay. So I don't have much to tweak, but I think there's areas.
Got you. Thanks. And you presume you didn't have anything to add on that, Tom?
I would just add that it might be helpful for us to talk to some of the members of the previous board who have rolled off, almost in a kind of exit interview style that we would do in business, to say, to ask them the question, could you see the board operating differently or more effectively, and see if there are any insights we can get from them. And to specifically answer your first question, because I think you might be right, I didn't. What I would like to see is us at the end of our term having been part of the delivery of what we know are the overarching ambitions, more participation in the cultural and creative industries by all Londoners, the soft power of the creative industries on behalf of the country being recognised, and an amelioration, as much as we can see and measure, of the disinvestment in culture in London by national bodies.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the exit interview idea sounds like an excellent one. And thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. That's it from me.
Thank you. Anything else on those? Or no? Over to Assembly Member Wilson, online.
Thank you, Chair. And actually, a couple of things that just come out of that last exchange kind of roll quite neatly into my question, which is about challenges for the sector as a whole, the cultural sector. So what do you think are the main challenges facing the sector at present, and what role do you think the Mayor and the GLA can play, perhaps alongside other public bodies, in addressing these, please?
Oh, I think it was you. Sorry, I was leaving space. I'm happy.
No, I will start. So thank you. I was just trying to work out where to look to see you, but I found you on a screen. Thank you. No, thank you for the question. And undoubtedly, there are significant challenges for the sector, both in the nation, but actually more acutely in London. We've seen a significant drop-off of local authority funding for cultural and creative activities. That was really begun during austerity, which we know has seen some local authorities lose, I think, more than 50% of their budgets, and they've had to make incredibly tough funding decisions across all services. And it is unfortunately a fact of life that quite often it's the cultural ones that are at the sharp end of those cuts. The levelling up agenda did London no favours. It's my view that you don't level up the country by levelling down the capital, and I think we've seen that actually to be true. Something like £16 million per annum run rate has now been chopped off of London organisations by central funding through the Arts Council England budget. We've seen some of our major institutions suffer as a result of that as well. Brexit has had an impact, or at least the visa changes and the visa regime since then has had an impact both on incoming talent and outgoing talent, making it harder to stage shows with those coming from other countries within the EU, but also making it harder for our talent to travel abroad and showcase what we have to offer. I think, therefore, they are some of the challenges that the capital is facing. The role of the Mayor and the role of the GLA in that, I think, predominantly is one of both convening to try and find some targeted solutions in those areas. It's also one of advocating, so advocating on behalf of the capital. I don't want to prejudge what will happen in the coming year and what our role will be in that. But I would hope that we continue to champion London, both with central government on the levelling up side, but also with the Arts Council of England, as they are now being, I think there's a review of them being undertaken. I think Margaret Hodge is leading that, which hopefully will be looking at the funding formulas and mechanisms that are being used. Again, I don't think disadvantaging the capital has any merit. One of the reasons I say that is very personal. Norwich Theatre, where I'm chair, put on a wonderful production of The Nutcracker with the Cuban ballet company. It's a Caribbean-themed version of the classic, and that toured the country. But one of the most important moments for us was being able to present that at the South Bank Centre at a sell-out run, because London provides these huge stages for tourists, huge stages for talent here in the city. And there's another angle, talking of talent, which I think is important too, and I know this with my City of London Corporation hat on. We saw an exodus of talent in some of the financial services firms as large firms moved different job types to different capitals around the country. For example, we saw certain fund managers go to Paris and Amsterdam, and in the case of trading floors and those kind of functions, the real fear was they were going to go to Frankfurt. Now, it actually hasn't been as bad as people thought it might be, and one of the reasons is, have you been to Frankfurt? The cultural offer is not as good as the offer here in London. In fact, London has, I think, something like 20,000 musical performances every year, and therefore the role of the creative industries in attracting talent to bring them into our firms so they thrive and they have an impact downstream on the broader economy is hugely important. So advocating for that as well, I think, has an ancillary economic benefit.
Shall I add to that?
Yeah, yes, please, Amanda. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, because it feels like there are so many things. How long have you got? Almost. So Tom's talked about the impact of funding and talked about levelling up. And I just want to reference just one of the organisations that we lost to the national portfolio organisations funded by the Arts Council, who are moving out of London as a result of the offer to move out, is Improbable Theatre, who were the people who made the puppets for My Neighbour Totoro. And I mention them because they're a really good example of a small-scale organisation with a really great creative vision, who could be thriving in London, who, for their own economic decisions, have chosen to move out and taken advantage of the Arts Council's offer for funding, increased funding to help organisations move from the capital. They're not the only one. I could mention Music for Youth, I could mention English Touring Opera, but I mention those as a real evidence of losing talent from the sector. I'm going to also mention the impact of Brexit and what that has done to touring. There has been a massive decrease in musicians touring to Europe and beyond because of the trickiness around visa access and status. There is no free visa travel across Europe, which was really helpful. I think the drop is something like 40% of orchestras, could be more. So the other thing I want to mention that relates to the rest of London, but also has a real impact in London in the creative industry is the cost of living crisis, which affects rents, studio spaces, artists' abilities to stay in London, in the capital, and have an income stream, and also the impact of the pandemic on mental health and well-being, and more widely mental health and well-being challenge rising over the last few years as well. So there's an awful lot, and I think that culture has a really important part to play, and the Mayor, I know, has many of these things as part of his priorities already. But I'd like to also mention the growth of creative health being a really useful way that culture can have positive impacts on London's wider priorities around social cohesion and well-being. Your question was about what the Mayor can do to help. I feel that the Mayor's priorities for culture are already in train to help. The London Growth Plan to create quality jobs. Our role as the creative and cultural sector is to make sure that culture is embedded in those priorities and implemented as part of those priorities. And we've got evidence of that with the East Bank Cultural Quarter and other fantastic developments. I am a Newham resident, born and bred. No longer there, I shouldn't say resident. I was born and bred in Newham. I feel like I'm a daughter of Newham. I have lived experience of the transformative power of really good, effective generation over long term in changing a borough and what it can do. So the growth of Newham post-Olympics and that cultural quarter is something that speaks hugely to me. Already in the train is boroughs of culture. I think they inject much needed funds, but don't do more than that. It's more than just injecting funds into the local community. It brings a really strong sense of identity, and social cohesion comes from that, and well-being is invested as part of that. I was in Lewisham as Lewisham became a borough of culture, so again I can speak personally to the effect that has. The Mayor's already got, as in his priorities, support for diverse Londoners so that they can get jobs. We know that the creative and cultural sector is not as diverse as it could be, or is not as diverse as some other pockets of the economy across London, and there's work to do on that the sector can help to do and support the Mayor's priorities on that. And I'm really excited about the programmes like the Culture at Risk Office, which are initiatives that are supporting the ability to help people stay in the sector in London, and the Creative Land Trust, which is helping artists to secure and stay in spaces that are useful for them. So I feel like there are lots of things that the Mayor can do and has paid attention to, and I feel that there are really strong opportunities for the sector itself and us as a board to help the sector to engage with well, to make sure we are part of the wider priorities for London's growth.
Okay, thank you. If public funding is challenging and is likely to continue to be challenging, which I think we probably all expect it to be, are there opportunities, and whether that's directly relevant to this role or not, but are there opportunities to try and kind of leverage alternative sources of sort of funding and entrepreneurship and sponsorship that would help perhaps ameliorate some of those challenges?
I'll take that initially, if that's okay. Yes, there are different pots of funding from different sources available. We know that private funding, so through philanthropy and donations from individuals and from foundations, is actually growing. Whether that is because it's picking up a reduction in public funding or whether that is because people are more generous than they used to be, I'm not sure. I'll give you one example, though, of one that is not often seen, and that is what I've observed in the context of the City of London. There you see huge planning applications for very large towers be approved by the Planning Committee, which is a committee that I happen to sit on. And it used to be the case that you'd get a sky garden put in these things to help it smooth through Planning Committee. And I think what's happened now, partly because of the way that very successfully culture is now part of the London planning framework and the London plan, but also because boroughs are being encouraged to consider this specifically, you're starting to see cultural spaces in some of these towers. So I think it's one undershaft was approved a few months ago, and that's going to be an enormous tower in the square mile. It's going to have classrooms for lifelong learning, which will be managed and programmed by the Museum of London, which of course this organisation will co-own with the corporation. Only the other day, 99 Bishopsgate was approved. 99 Bishopsgate, similarly to all these other towers, will have a lot of offices in, but it will also have a 6-storey cultural space and a several hundred-seat theatre, which will be able to be used for programming of new cultural output. That is, if you like, those developers' contribution through this community infrastructure levy, so the SIL funding, which is made available by the city to different activities. Sometimes it's social housing, sometimes it's other things. In this case, it's cultural output. So I think the SIL mechanism and the agreement that planners have with developers when they put these proposals in is an interesting mechanism to find money that is going to be available for these kind of activities. And it's something that I think the board might want to look at and how we might work with and learn from organisations like the city and how they do it and how it can be done even better on a bigger scale.
Amanda, do you have anything to add to that?
I simply would want to reflect that, yes, there may be other opportunities, but again, bringing it back to what this board does, our role is to help connect and convene those conversations. We are advisory, we are not operational, so I have lots of ideas. Personally, I also write for The Stage. We should have a drink and I could rant at length about what we might do. But in terms of the process for this board and the conversation today, I just would like to direct it back to what is within our remit, which is we're an advisory board. So I'd really welcome the opportunities that Tom has outlined in talking to business communities and looking at examples and having the board bring in the expertise that Tom's already showing to put that as part of the dialogue.
Thank you. I've just got one other very quick thing to ask before I hand back to the chair, and that is, Tom, in your introduction you mentioned about difficulties in hard times of the pandemic in particular. So I'm just keen to understand a bit more about how you, what you did with Barbican in particular, and helping sort of transition back out of lockdown. I mean, one of my biggest concerns and fears about sort of cultural activity in London generally is the loss of venues, performing arts venues, music in particular. But what you did with Barbican to keep things ticking along, and how that could translate into further help and guidance and support for other venues, pubs, clubs, etc. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question, and I know that the Mayor and the unit here are also concerned about the loss of cultural venues across the capital, and we've seen that in the current strategy under the Good Growth Plan. In the case of the Barbican is blessed because it is owned entirely by the City of London Corporation, and in many ways I think it's probably the world's largest local authority, local council arts centre. That meant that unlike many of our peers in the capital, they didn't have to make mass redundancies during the pandemic. They also didn't have to take COVID recovery loans, and the last government were very keen to talk about the COVID recovery loans as being an important helpline and a lifeline for these organisations. And to a certain extent they were, but I think it's worth putting that in context, that in the case of France, the big institutions in Paris, they weren't loans, they were grants. And so actually there was much stronger central government support for their major institutions, and these loans are soon to be repayable, and maybe there's a conversation to have with them. But the Barbican, we had one particular commitment that we made as a board and as an executive team together, which was we would try and remain open every day that we were allowed to legally remain open, so artists could perform and audiences could enjoy. And in fact, the centre was the first major show to reopen after the lockdowns finished. It was a Cole Porter musical, Anything Goes. What's not to like about tap dancing sailors? And it was a smash hit, sold out run. And not only was it brilliant to see the impact it had on audiences and performers, it brought joy back. And I think it's easy amongst the numbers and amongst the kind of looking back at the difficulty that we had in the pandemic to forget actually that what we do in the creative industries is bring joy, and that has huge power and it's hugely important. And so I'm really proud of how the Barbican pulled itself through the pandemic, deeply empathetic and sympathetic to other institutions that had a harder time and are still having a hard time. And I think one of the things that we will have to look at, without prejudging our work plan, will be those that are still recovering and what support might be available.
Great. Thank you very much indeed. Back to the chair.
Thanks, Assembly Member Wilson. And no one else wants to? Fantastic. I just wanted to briefly follow up on that in terms of main challenges. And I think we're sort of moving towards that this a little bit in discussion about the pandemic and recovery. But the Mayor's manifesto is specifically got various policies relating to supporting the nighttime economy, and there is concern about the nighttime economy. Obviously, not all of the nighttime economy is cultural or creative, but is that an area that you feel is important in terms of the one of the challenges that the Cultural Leadership Board can assist with?
Oh, it certainly is a very high priority for the Mayor, and therefore for us, as you said, because culture is a part of the nighttime economy. I really would like to, well, we do know that there is work in train on building the nighttime task force, and I would fully expect and look forward to having engagement with that task force in some shape or form with the board itself, should we be appointed. I don't think we can underestimate the importance of the nighttime economy, and we can sit and discuss what it does for inward investment, tourism, skills development, personal safety, etc. There are so many touch points that are pertinent to the nighttime economy. But yes, absolutely, I very much hope that we will be talking to that task force. I think we will be in lockstep with them, I should hope.
Thank you. Tom, did you have anything to add?
I actually don't have anything to add to Amanda's.
That's fine. Yes, so you see basically working with the task forces as the key part of in there. That's fine. And we've touched upon this a few times in terms of the Mayor's current or future programmes that he has and commitments. And I do appreciate that, obviously, you know, you've emphasised that it's this is an advisory board, and you know, I feel like sometimes you're steering a little bit away from expressing your own preferences or anything like that. But with that in mind, what do you feel might be the priorities in terms of the Mayor's programmes that could be the priorities for the Cultural Leadership Board? Where can they most add value, and how would you intend to support that delivery of that?
So I am steering away from my personal opinion because I have a regular column in The Stage where I'm free to vent my own personal opinions. So I'll take that there.
Another plug. It's not paywalled, is it? Some of the
I think it is paywalled. Sorry about that, but it's worth the investment anyway. But
you'll take that on board.
But why I say that? I mean, I'm joking, but I'm only half joking because I'm really keen on making sure that we support the Mayor's priorities and are in train with that. And of course, we will all have our opinions behind that, and that's what good consensus is, and good dialogue will engender that conversation and also look at what's best and how it best aligns. So given that our priority is to kind of explore how we can best bring that information in a way that's timely and convene those conversations that are useful to the strategy, I would be unsurprised to see skills development very high on the list of what we need to tackle. The cultural sector is not alone in having been affected by the pandemic and people retiring early and moving on, etc. We are extra impacted by that because of the disparity of wages in the sector. We, on average, are above average, but within the wider sector there is a lot of lower income jobs, so people have moved on, which has left a skills deficit. So I'm really interested in what we do as a board to support that skills development. I would not be surprised if that's very high on our list. And I've mentioned AI as well in terms of business change. That would not surprise me at all. I'm also struck that the Mayor has very high priorities around inclusion in the sector, and in London more widely, and given the wider political climate, I would not be surprised that that comes onto our agenda in some shape or form. But yes, that's as far as I'll be drawn on my personal opinion.
That's fine. I'll try and do it up. But let me try and rephrase it a little bit. But so where do you feel, and obviously you mentioned some of these before, where do you feel the board is able to adds the most value in terms of those current and future programmes that the Mayor's has? So what do you feel is the places you're going to be able to focus on?
Go ahead. I was just going to say, I'm not sure yet because we've yet to be appointed. So
I know, and you have made the point, but I also know, as Assemblymember Garrett has made the point, you do think about what you're going to do. So I'm not trying to. It's definitely not not an attempt to sort of, well, we don't have an opportunity to get you back. Well, no, maybe we would in a year and say, have you done it? But it's an understanding of getting your understanding of what the work may look like. It's not an attempt to hold you at anything. So
if I speak to the past board and the makeup of the board, we had an incredibly diverse board that covered skill sets from young people's education and training, gaming and research, placemaking and grassroots visual arts activity, building specialism. There was such a broad range on the board that we're able to add their, not just insights, but connect the teams with people who they may not know, who may be useful to inform future policy. And I'd really look forward to that happening again, to kind of go, who have we got in the room to support this best? I would like to mention Amara Rose and Nigel Tumasi. I hope I haven't mispronounced his name, because we did a couple of sessions deep diving into placemaking, reflecting on the Culture at Risk and Creative Land Trust work, but not just exclusively to that. And they were absolutely phenomenal in bringing their networks and connections and expertise and knowledge into the room around young people and engagement with placemaking. So I think things like that show that it depends on who's in the room and where we decide, and I really don't mean to be...
That's fine.
So sorry, go ahead.
I think looking at the people who will be ambassadors, so members of the Cultural Leadership Board, we could pretty much draw upon their experience to cover any topic. I would hope, though, just thinking through some of the names, firstly, we would double down on our support for the successful programmes such as the London Borough of Culture, which is Wandsworth coming up this year, such as creative enterprise zones that we've talked about, such as the East Bank, which is progressively coming online throughout this year. You will know the many different organisations that's bringing together. These are big flagship programmes, but they're evolving, and I think we will have a role in helping support that evolution. I would also hope that participation in the cultural and creative industries will be something that we will be able to support in terms of ideas and advocacy. I do think it is interesting, particularly in certain subsections of the sector, and I'm thinking, for example, in classical music, and in administration as well of organisations. You do see there is quite an underrepresentation of socio-economic groups, of class, of gender, and of ethnic background. And I think that is an issue, particularly in London, given how diverse the capital is. And so that, I know, is also something that runs through the existing strategy, and I would hope that that would be a meaty issue for us as a board to get our teeth into. So again, not precluding what we'll work on. I think they are likely to become topics that we will be looking at.
Thank you. That's helpful. And just one specific, because it hasn't come up. What role do you see the board playing in the successful reopening of the new Museum of London? I'm going to ask Tom first, just because
I mean, as much as I'd like us both to be there to cut the ribbon, I suspect someone more important than us will do that. Look, I think it's going to be a celebratory and an important moment. I mean, I should say, of course, the City of London Corporation is co-funding this, so I have kind of potentially 2 feet in the camp. It's a hugely exciting project. It's a major moment for the Square Mile and for the capital, and I know that some of the outreach programmes that they're planning with schools will be really exciting. I know that the ambitions they have, I think they're going to have a glass tunnel so you can see the tube go through in the new site. I mean, some of the stuff that the Sharon Ament's putting together is going to be world-class and super exciting. So I would be happy just to participate in the opening. We don't have to be on a podium, do we, Amanda?
I'd also like to just give credit to Sharon's phenomenal leadership over the past so many years on this. She's an incredible individual, and it's been amazing to have her on the board in previous iterations. I think our role is ambassadorial in that respect. I think our role is also to amplify and champion the potential of that museum and what it does, not just for education in the sector, not just youth engagement in the sector, but also inward investment in the sector. It's going to be a huge destination, and I think it is our duty as a board to really help amplify that. And also, you know, the opening is a moment and then it's forever, right? So the board, whether it's us, whether it's anyone else, in 10 years' time, the board will have a responsibility and a duty to help to make sure we explore all the connections for potential in that building, because as you've said, there's infrastructure stories there, there's land use stories there, there's youth engagement stories there, there's an awful lot. So I think there's going to be lots more, but absolutely I'll put it on record that I'd like to be at the opening. Putting it out there. But irrespective of that, I think we have a duty to kind of fly the flag for that and help it make the connections. Despite Sharon's brilliance in leadership, we can always tease out and find people that aren't necessarily in front of her or any leaders there.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you very much. Does anyone have anything else to ask? No? That is all for us then. Unless there's anything else you want to let us know, I think we feel...
No, thank you for
thank you very much. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Tom, for attending today's meeting. You're free to leave. We're going to deliberate here in the chamber. If you want, then you can go round and sit in the public gallery to listen to us deliberate, but you also do definitely not need to do that. But yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for spending time. And yes, we're now going to free to leave. Yes. I think somebody will arrive to... There we are. There we are. Okay, the committee is now required to make a decision on its recommendation to the Mayor as to whether or not each nominee should be appointed as co-chair of the Mayor's Cultural Leadership Board. And there are 3 possible resolutions: that it be agreed to recommend that the Mayor should proceed with his appointment of Amanda and Tom to the role of co-chairs, that it be agreed not to object to the proposed appointment, or that it be agreed not to recommend. The second one, we could write to the Mayor with further comments should we need to, or agreed not to recommend. So can I just suggest we discuss the candidates one at a time, starting with Amanda? Would anyone like to start discussion? Go for it, Caroline.
Happy to. I thought she was incredibly impressive, clearly understands the complexity of the sort of whole cultural picture in London, has a really clear vision for how to work as a co-chair and the benefits that come from co-chairing and having sort of 2 different people presenting, different background experience, but actually working together effectively. And I thought it looked like they'd really thought about that and how that would work. So I thought that was really impressive. And I thought also she had a very clear, and as they both did, but since we're talking about Amanda, understanding about the challenges. So I would be firmly in camp recommend.
Thank you very much.
Go next.
Yeah.
Thing on. I would tend to agree. I think my reservation was just, when I asked them what they would like to achieve, I suppose one of the things it's just in its own strange way, this is a sort of job interview, and I always assume that people going for relatively senior posts in any case will have sort of thought themselves into the role, and I think they were clearly speaking of Amanda, clearly familiar with the industry and the problems and so on. For example, in response to Alex's question, I felt that there wasn't a really clear answer to my what do you want to achieve. It seemed to be the way that it works is okay, and we'll continue doing that. So that doesn't take me out of the camp of recommending, but I would have liked to have heard something more specific. If I've been myself in a position of taking on or anticipating taking on a new role, and before I get there, I'm always thinking, well, when I get there, I thinking about this, and I'm thinking about that, and I'd like to do these things, and there doesn't seem to be as much as I might have hoped for in that.
Okay, thank you. Can I go to Assemblymember Wilson and then come back? Assemblymember Wilson.
I haven't really got anything to add. Okay. I thought she's extremely well experienced and knowledgeable about the sector. I think as a double act, I think they'll do fantastically. Both, I know we're really talking about Amanda, but no, I think the 2 different sets of sort of backgrounds and experiences will complement each other pretty well. So I'm happy to go with option 1.
Thanks, Assemblymember Wilson. Assemblymember Russell.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of come back in relation to what Assemblymember Garrett was just saying about outcomes, because I thought that Amanda was very clear about expressing her understanding that this is not an operational role, that it's a leadership role, and kind of providing that kind of leadership for the sector rather than delivering specific outcomes. So I just wonder whether whether there was a slight cross-purposesness of that bit of conversation, Neil, but I didn't see that as I don't see that as a problem.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think Amanda, she's clearly got incredibly strong sector experience, knowledge, connections, and I was really pleased with the descriptions of how to operate within a board, and that really all made me happy. I understand your reservations, Neil. I was sort of trying to tease it out at the end. But it's an active choice. Do you know what I mean? It didn't make me think that it was because she hadn't thought about the job or hadn't thought about what she's going to do, but it's an active choice to say, I'm working as part of this collective and therefore I'm going to be led by this collective. My role is to bring these people along. So while I understand, it doesn't make me think it's a down mark in that case, because I think it didn't make me think she hadn't thought about it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. But yeah, it is. It's unusual in a job interview because you're supposed to say those things. Okay, so has anyone else got anything to say on Amanda? Okay, I have been passed a piece of paper. So the proposal is that it be agreed to recommend that the Mayor should proceed with his appointment of Amanda Parker to the role of co-chair of the Mayor's Cultural Leadership Board. Is everyone agreed with that? Yep. What do they need? Fantastic. Okay. Can we now discuss our recommendation regarding Tom? Would anyone like to start off that discussion?
I bring the changes by starting off on this one. I'm going to essentially say the same thing. He did kind of acknowledge that he hadn't really given me an answer and then came back with an answer in a little while, which I don't, I thought that was fine. As I say, to be honest, it raised more questions in my mind about what are the outcomes of this whole board, which is not a question for the person who might be co-chairing it, but it's a question that I'm left with this afternoon. But not to rehearse what we've already said, I thought his knowledge of the sector was good. His answers, other than in that regard, initially were fine, and I probably don't need to rehearse the conversation that we've just had about the thing that I said about Amanda that I'm now saying again about Tom. But anyway, I will say that again, and you're welcome to say that's not enough not to recommend, which in any case I'm also saying.
Thank you, Assemblymember Garrett. Assemblymember Russell. I'd like to see anyone try and work out what that meant in isolation. If they read that back in the minutes, it'd be Assemblymember Russell.
I'm also in camp recommend for Tom. I thought, clearly different kind of experience to Amanda, but I do think those experiences are complementary, and I think he was the one who raised the kind of the levelling up, levelling down of London, and also the impact of the Brexit visa regime on talent, both coming to London and travelling from London, and the experience of practitioners working in this city not getting to do, not getting those the challenges of that. But I think yes, broadly, having someone who has that experience of the City of London, because there are opportunities within that in terms of funding and dealing with the precarity of the arts sector post-pandemic, and after the kind of the impact of years of austerity budgeting on culture funding. So I think having again, that's a sort of complementary piece of experience, which so I would be happy to recommend.
Thank you. Assemblymember Wilson.
Yeah, agree with all of that. Very happy to recommend. I thought the answers were very engaging and knowledgeable. The experience, it speaks for itself. I think a very, very strong candidate, and I'm sure he'll do very, very well.
Yeah, thanks. And I agree as well. I think that his answers and his breadth of experience in terms of a range of cultural organisations on boards, as well as his experience elsewhere, I thought was really impressive. And yeah, I think I was also, just to talk about both of them, I was very, it's not easy to actually co-chair, but they clearly have thought about it and they have spoken, and that really makes me happy as well. That makes me think they're going to make a success of this. So yeah, I'm quite happy to recommend as well. So can I put it to the meeting that it be agreed to recommend that the Mayor should proceed with his appointment of Tom Slay to the role of co-chair of the Mayor's Cultural Leadership Board?
Agreed.
Okay, agreed. And that's everything. And another bit of paper, sorry. And thank you. A letter will be sent to the Mayor following this meeting to confirm the committee's recommendations. And as I have no other business, that concludes today's meeting. And I now declare this meeting to be closed.
Broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.